Hello, my friends. Today, how I used alcohol to cope with anxiety. This is more of a personal share, and maybe you'll resonate with parts of this. Even if alcohol wasn't part of your story, we all have different coping mechanisms, and you might resonate with some of the themes. So this goes back to my teenage years. I was very socially anxious. The social world was a bit of a mystery to me, and it felt like this difficult Rubik's cube that I had to solve. And I felt deep down like I wasn't enough, was weak, pathetic, and a loser were the three words that really resonated with my body. This is sort of later in life when I was discovering what I really believed. I could go back to that time and feel that's what I felt like I was. And so in social situations, it's like I really need to prove myself. So I'd kind of get really stressed in my system trying to manage what was going on. On top of that, I tended to kind of freeze a lot. And in like school, social situations, I actually, despite the stress to try to manage, mostly what I'll do is stay more quiet, to blend in and not let anyone notice me. So I was kind of like trying to be noticed on the inside and feeling stressed about wanting to be noticed, then also sort of froze on the outside, trying to blend in and not attract anyone's attention. Turns out this is quite a painful spot to be in, and being torn in two places at once and just not feeling authentic, not just feeling like you can be yourself. So when I discovered alcohol, I was very, very drawn to it. It was really interesting. Start going to parties when you're 14, 15 or whatever. And I quickly got sucked up into that. I used to be renowned as the guy who would like throw up, end up, throwing up everywhere at parties or like blacking out. Like there's a couple of times it's quite extreme, blacking out, drinking tons of spirits. Partly because I think I was an attempt to be cool. I thought it would make me more cool, but really I think it just relaxed something inside of me. It wasn't even necessary that it was that much fun. It's just that there was this sense that something was starting to relax in me if I would drink, and I didn't really understand that at the time. But it's just this like, that frozenness on the outside of my body would just softened a little bit, and there was a bit more space. Like I said, it didn't even make me more sociable, like necessarily, I don't think, but it just gave me something that I couldn't find anywhere else. And this pattern continued, through university into my 20s. By the time I got to my 20s, like this kind of pattern of all the agitation under the surface and the frozen numbness on the outside had just got more intense. And I'd taken to going on, after work, or on the weekends, I would go on long walks. I would leave work or walk out my flat on the weekend and just walk round and round for hours and hours and hours, just drinking, walking really fast and drinking continuously. And this was like what I looked forward to. This was my life. This was just the only space I had where I felt okay. Like I could just, I could be myself. There was nothing hanging over me. There was no work I had to do. I wasn't in any social situation. It was like in that place, just racing along the street, drinking. It was like, space, freedom. This is it. This is the one. And so I used to live for that. Particularly, Saturday was the best because I could get up at the crack of noon, have a coffee, and then go out knowing that I could walk and drink for as long as I wanted that day, because the next day was Sunday and it was going to be okay. I could just deal with my life then. Whereas in the evenings, I kind of always knew that, okay, tomorrow morning I got work, I'm going to be hungover. And I think what it did for me was the alcohol like softened that frozen numbness on the outside, and the walking like helped me dissipate all that agitation in the body. So the combination just was the only thing, or the most effective thing I could find to get some relief from all the tension and stress that was in the body. Again, I didn't know this at the time. I just knew on some level that it felt good, and that's the only place I wanted to be. And so really, I can see back now, the alcohol was my attempt to cope with this impossible situation in my body of all this agitation wanting to come up and all this freeze locking it all in. And eventually, in fact, one more thing, there was also, as an interesting little aside, one of the other coping mechanisms I had was like nihilistic philosophy, like really dark, eccentric, off the wall thinking. So I used to also read lots of really dark philosophy. And when I was walking around, I would just like think about how much I hated life, basically, and how awful life was, and how I was the only person who could see how terrible it was. And I'd read these sort of nihilistic philosophy books, and I can see now that was just a projection outwards of my pain. It was something I could cling to make me feel better about myself. Like, I'm the only one who can see. I'm the only one who understands. Therefore I'm worth something. And also just a way of trying to make sense of the suffering that I was experiencing. Later on, that would kind of dissipate as I sorted myself out. That would just almost dissolve, and I would almost forget about it. But it's funny looking back at how eccentric and kind of twisted my mind was. Then I kind of hit the wall just before my 28th birthday, and I had like a big bender, and then I was at my friend's leaving do, just at a day event. It wasn't a big drinking thing even, but I arrived drunk, and I remember at the end of the night I threw up all over these air beds that had been inflated to everyone to sleep on, and I sort of threw up across 3 of them just to ruin them all, and then broke down crying. And that was kind of the beginning of the end. Then I got some help, started going to AA, and got really into meditation and spirituality. And this was where my life took a turn. And the interesting thing is, though, I got really into meditation, and that helped. It helped soften some of the numbness. But I've been using alcohol to deal with the suffering, all the tension and stress. But that was all still there, right? And so I had turned to other addictions. I got addicted, I'd binge chocolate every day and coffee. And that was better than the alcohol, but it's still my new attempt to cope with my suffering and my anxiety. And the meditation didn't really get down to that deep level. It got me more present, more aware. It softened some of the numbness, connected me to my body a little bit. Because I used to do quite a lot of Vipassana. I did a couple of Vipassana retreats and things like that got me more connected. Those were incredibly painful though, but that's a story for another day. Yeah, the meditation, it promises a lot, but in a situation like that with numbness, frozenness, trauma in the body, it doesn't really touch the sides. It doesn't get to what needs to be gotten to. It doesn't go that deep to where that anxiety lives, to where the deeper emotional wounds are, that are driving this whole thing. So, eventually I kept trying different things. Eventually I discovered somatic work. And I received some sessions from someone, from a facilitator. I remember in the second session, I started to cry. And that was the first time I felt genuine relief in such a long time, without alcohol at least. It was like, it's like something in me relaxed in the same way that I was looking for when I drank beer. Like, you drink and it's like, something in you relaxes. But actually, when you have an emotional release, it's the same thing, but in a healthier way. And this was like miraculous. And so I started going into it more and more. I just went headlong into all this somatic work and started digging up the different layers. And I was astonished at what I found. Just the different layers of hurt and fear and shame, and anger in particular was a huge one. There were many layers of intense anger that were coming up, and rage that had been repressed from all my time at school. Every moment I've been frozen in school and not engaging, I've been maybe really frustrated or pissed off at people, or wanting, all this energy wants to come out, or afraid, and I'd held it all in, and it hadn't gone anywhere. It stayed there. And so I was finally getting back in touch with these layers that I had suppressed and repressed. And it made so much sense to me all of a sudden, as when I'd have a session processing some anger, and it'd be so intense, it'd be like, well, no wonder I wanted to drink. I've been holding this like raging dragon of anger, holding it in my body. Like, no wonder I was looking for that relaxation. And that's what I've been trying to escape from this whole time. Right? That's it. It's the body, it's the emotions, it's the energies that are trapped, that are held, that is driving this behavior, because they're very deep down, so we don't notice them, but they're there. They're still influencing our experience, and our body and mind is trying to cope with it. And as I delved into that more and more, that's when the addictive behavior started to shift. If I was binging chocolate every day, I started binging chocolate every other day. And then it was once every 3 days. And so it continued, and so it continues. In fact, it's an ongoing journey. But that's really when the anxiety started to fall away, like the social anxiety, as well as the addictions. It all comes together. And the reason I've continued to do this, started Drunken Buddha and all those other things, was just because it gave me so much. And it just made so much sense that this is what is it. And it doesn't matter what your addiction is. It could be to drugs and alcohol. It could be to sex and relationships and approval and codependency. It could be to being in control, having a perfect, clean house. It could be to success or money, praise. It's all structurally what's going on is all the same, even if the content is different from moment to moment, from person to person. So know that, what you're doing, if there's some compulsive or addictive behavior you kind of notice within yourself, know that that's not who you are in an absolute sense. You're not an addict. This is just your body's best attempt at coping with what it's holding, and was trained and conditioned to hold. Because just like me, when I was at school, I didn't feel I had the safety to tell the people around me, my peers, certainly not the teachers, no. My parents, no, that wasn't safe to go tell them. So I held it all in. And many others have much more intense situations than I was in, and are, have a lot of weight that they're, burden that they're carrying from their life experiences. And from that, it makes so much sense that we turn to all kinds of substances and behaviors to cope and manage it. It's completely innocent. But it's, next time you reach for something, just ask yourself the curious question. Allow yourself to do so, by all means. But just ask, what am I trying to soothe here? What am I trying to get here? What do I imagine will happen when I take a drink or text the lover or whatever it is? You can start to slowly bring some curiosity to these patterns, and it can be a very rewarding experience. So I do support people to get in touch with their feelings, their emotions, all this stuff. Check out all the information below, and like, subscribe, all that jazz, and I'll see you next time. Bye.